Here on a beautiful day. We have a few presentations today, and so we're going to try and keep to the agenda and schedule. Good luck with that. But might we just have a roll call first before we get started?
Trustee Miller.
Here.
Trustee Mason.
Here.
Trustee Morris.
Here.
Trustee Nunes. Trustee Perry.
Here.
Trustee Peterson.
Here.
Chair Brown.
Here.
Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you. And calling everybody to order, and we'll look first at the consent agenda, and hopefully you will have time to look at the minutes from the May 25th meeting. Any comments or suggestions, friendly amendments to the minutes, or may I ask for a proposal to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Against? Okay. Minutes are approved. Given that there are no action items, we are now 2 minutes ahead of schedule.
Keep it up.
There we go. So it's great to welcome our new provost on board and formally for this committee, and to just get a sense of what he has been sort of mulling over during his brief tenure so far, and also a couple of other presentations with respect to just an update on approval of new academic programs, and also on the, I guess, general education essential study module that we heard about last time. So the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Chair Brown, and welcome to all the Board of Trustee members, the Oregon Tech faculty and staff, our guests that are either here in person or listening in. It's a delight to report on my early stages of my tenure here as provost. As everyone's probably aware, I transitioned to the provost role at the beginning of July, and since that time I've been working very hard to build relationships within the community and also explore how we achieve the strategic vision that President Nagy laid out at the beginning of the year with the convocation. And that theme has guided what I've attempted to do during my first academic calendar year, 1 month, and 3 years on the job. I wanted to lay some groundwork to discuss the discussion items on the agenda, because I think it'll frame it properly. And one of the goals that I've been working on is setting up leadership necessary for successfully achieving those strategic visions. So just to announce, remark on the couple of items. First of all, the Dean of Engineering Technology and Management College, we have contracted to and are commencing the search. Parker Executive is working with us. Professor Roger Lindgren, Civil Engineering Chair, is chairing the committee, and we'll begin the posting of the position and the analysis of candidates as time goes on. We've got a timeline now laid out for the process, so it's very important that we acquire an innovative, energetic new dean for ETM. Along those lines, as I sort of transitioned into the provost role and also helped to oversee ETM this academic year, Hallie Newport has served as interim dean for 2 years. She's been serving as a special advisor to me to help me with ETM affairs. Dean Maupin, who's Leanne is here. She transitioned. She was interim provost last year. She's also serving to assist me in some of the transitory steps in this first year as provost. We've appointed an interim director of library services and a assistant director. Dawn Lowen-Sensen is the interim director. She's located at Portland Metro Campus, and Asia Betancourt McCarthy is the assistant interim director here at Klamath Falls. And this charge to both of them is to look at strategic planning as we are going to start the search for the new university library in the upcoming month or two. So revisioning how library services engage the academic community. The world is changing rapidly, and they are really critical to the success of the academic enterprise. The second philosophy dealt with faculty professional career development, and I'm getting to the new programs in a moment here, but I just wanted to lay some of the groundwork. So if the way I envision faculty professional development, there is a component that faces inward, and that's the terminology I use. It deals with excellence in pedagogy, which is absolutely primary for Oregon Tech if it continues its legacy of preparing students for career paths. And so we're supporting, there was a CCT, that's the Commission on College Teaching. They host workshops before and during the convocation, which reach out to new faculty and also engage them in pedagogical preparation and also improvement. Those went on during the convocation, and they are also working on providing some incentivization through mini grants throughout the year to help faculty do that. We are working on, with CIO Jim Jones, on developing a faculty innovation center. This facility will allow faculty to explore how they can use newest technology in their teaching. And that'll include augmented and virtual reality. And I hope at some point the board has an opportunity to hear from Jim Jones on how he is envisioning that. Also, classroom, we will be planning on looking at how we renovate classrooms, teaching classrooms over the course of the next year. The other thing that and this ties to shared governance, I have said it since I've walked in, and I absolutely 100% believe this, and I believe everybody here does that. The academic side of the house with faculty, staff, and also administrators, we're all a team working together to achieve success. And we have to work closely with the non-academic side of the house, financial, et cetera. And so at the chair retreat, the academic council retreat, which preceded or overlapped with the beginning of the convocation, we brought together the senior executive team, which consists of VP for finance, strategic enrollment, et cetera. And we had a day and a half of exercises and group teamwork with the chairs to think about how in this upcoming year we're going to look to improve the integration of the academic and non-academic side of the house in terms of thinking. So for example, the efficiency in how we run our departments and our units, assisting faculty with issues of workload, et cetera. So we've started that process, and that retreat was a kickoff for a year-long series of activities. We meet regularly every 3 weeks, and we're exploring providing tools, training the chairs, lots of other opportunities to look at how we improve the academic enterprise. I think you're going to hear, like maybe at a different board meeting, some exciting results, steps forward that we've taken. So that also continued during the convocation. When I gave my first address as provost to the faculty, I spoke for a bit about my vision of how we achieve the strategic goals of the university and the mission. But I also brought in the executive staff to talk, the VPs to talk to the faculty too. And so the goal is to have a level of collegiality, transparency, and accountability where we all recognize that value. I think that's absolutely critical going forward. Okay, so the programming piece, I just wanted to it falls sort of under the umbrella of shared governance. And it is absolutely essential that somebody who's a newcomer, I build a mutual trust and respect with faculty so that I am going to be very transparent as much, obviously respecting confidentiality and privacy, so that faculty have a voice and a role, but recognize that the decision-making process has to go through the provost's office and the president, et cetera. The formal process that we have in place, but we work together towards some form of consensus. on practices here. Again, I am not as familiar with what's gone on in the past, but I see that as absolutely critical. One of the things I've heard from faculty quite a bit is the workload and the structuring of the workload and the challenges that presents. And I believe one of those challenges, there are several elements to that, but one I just want to mention today. We have 50 standing committees at the university. That does not include special committees for a variety of purposes. They take up an inordinate amount of faculty and staff time. Many of them are very productive, others not so much. And we've all lived through organizations who have a legacy, right, of things created no longer serving a function, but they don't die, they go on. And so, but what the challenge is that really monopolizes a large amount of the faculty's time. So if we think of the inward facing and the outward facing, so I didn't get to that point, the creative works element, that I'm asking faculty to think about what they're doing out there in the world. It could be applied research, it could be some major project that they're working on in the community. And that becomes part of what we do to help with faculty professional development. Anyway, the service, that particular committee piece, we are looking at streamlining. So I am going to appoint a committee on committees, another committee, but their role is to help establish guidelines as to which committees may be combined, modified, eliminated, and without impacting the functionality of the university, and thereby free up faculty and staff time to do other things. I think that has been a mantra I've heard since I've come to the door. And so there's one element, one way to do that. I don't want to talk about policies or reviewing that or guidelines today because I'm just not at that point yet. I am trying to make an effort to meet with all the committees that are charged to me, my office, to give them, committees that report to me, to give them and work with the chair of that committee to develop charges for that committee so that we have, essentially we get productive activity and we make sure that the time that folks devote to this committees is valuable. And in turn, we move things forward. Having served in academia for 25 years, I've served on many committees where we've met for 2 or 3 years and we haven't moved forward. And there's lots of reasons, but I think that's absolutely critical to the success of the university that we improve that. So, and so also the model of strengthening leadership, we need to have and empower the deans and the chairs to be able to do their job in a way that they can be successful. I mentioned how we're working with the academic council. I've talked about hiring new deans and also training the new deans. And so at some point, President Naki's vision, or part of his vision, is that chairs and deans share some responsibility for not only functionality of their units, not only creating new programming and strengthening program we already have, but participating in some way in fundraising, participating in many ways in our connections to industry and other organizations outside the university that are essential for raising our profile. So that's going to be a goal this upcoming year, is to keep working to strengthen those positions. Obviously, we don't have a dean-free TM, but I'm working with Dr. Liang to help her with HAS and establish sort of kind of the culture of that the deans are empowered to work to the benefit of their college and work closely with the chairs to help them to be able to manage their units. All right. So I get to the discussion elements of new programs and review of existing programs. So those two are, where I've come from, those two are closely related, that all programs should have some sort of periodic academic program review. And there are lots of reasons for that. Programs over time may lose their vitality, they may lose their direction, or they may be doing very well and we need to strengthen them to allow them to grow. And so over this year, working with the faculty committees and other folks, I'm going to look at how we create an academic program review process this will take most of the academic year to work on it. But I think it'll be invaluable as we explore which programs can be strengthened. Some programs may need to be modified, and also it lays the groundwork for what programs you need to create. Right? You need to explore what you already have. So that process has not begun, but it'll involve a number of the committees, including CPC, the Graduate Council, et cetera, to explore, Faculty Senate, to explore how we go about creating that process. I've been at 2 institutions. The first institution I worked at as faculty member, I was on, for 6 years on the Academic Program Review Committee, where we rewrote the rules about how what needs to be considered, and also developed a new strategy for a new program. So let me briefly mention new programming process here. And we have a good process here. I believe there's room for streamlining. And also, as a former faculty member, I recognize my weakness in trying to provide a financial analysis of what the program's direction ought to be, what the market looks like for that kind of programming. And I think in today's world, that has to be part of a new program policy. So those elements, the knowledge and expertise may not rely in the faculty realm. So I'm hoping that I can work with the executive staff to provide some background or some support for the development of those elements. So academic quality and content, the market that we hope to serve, a realistic evaluation environment, everybody has different terminology, environmental scan, et cetera. The financial implications of starting and maintaining the program. And all programs should have some element of the periodic analysis once it's in place, the program review. It should provide a stopping point, a milestone, to look at whether programs are succeeding, failing, et cetera, and make some decisions at that point, how we go forward. Very data-driven, evidence-based process. And my sense is here, there are many faculty and staff that buy into that concept, and I think we're going to be very successful. I also understand that the board has, so one thing I'd like to know more about, I've heard stories about how new programs are presented to the board for review. The questions I have center around, does the board wish to see the entire program application? Do they wish to see parts of it? Do they wish to get highlights? These are just questions. And also the timing. The timing is really complicated. You have internal processes that must sort of follow through. And we've got external processes that impact it. And as I now sit on the statewide provost council, I begin to appreciate how the relationship with HEC and how that process moves forward. But my goal is to help the board to at least get the most transparent view of the program, and I will bring any assistance needed to provide that. And also, I will work very hard to expedite any program that gets approved through the process, and give feedback as I can on where the process stands. They're all the final element. I'm sorry, I mentioned statewide provost council. You folks are more familiar than I am with HEC. And then there's Northwest accreditation we have to go through before we get final approval. And those processes take time. Many of those groups all of those groups after us are certainly out of our control. And so, but my goal as provost is to make sure we move as expeditiously, and if the program's approved, I will do my best to present it in the most favorable light to the statewide provost council, so that we can get rapid approval or feedback on it. So the essential studies model update. So I was very impressed during my interview process when I met with the GIAC. They talked about the model and shared information. And since that time, I've had more time to explore the model that's been created. And I think it is a wonderful opportunity to distinguish us in terms of our general education. So phase one was the creation of the model. And I think the way I viewed it, that this has taken us to a point now where we need to figure out how we can potentially implement this model. And phase 2 is really involving an exploration of the next stage. How is must the model modify to deal with differences in curriculum between the programs? Programs have very different curriculum. And how they stage the sequence of general ed courses is different. So these are real opportunities to explore how we creatively could implement this. We have I won't say it's a challenge, it's an opportunity. We have such a wide spectrum of student demographics, from high school students all the way to working professionals coming back to get a degree or a certificate or what have you. If you're going to implement something across that spectrum, you're going to have to modify and adjust and shape what you do to accommodate the essence of that. Other challenges include, what is the financial impact? Will it have an impact on time to graduation for students? How do we deal with these? They're real issues that we need to explore. And so this year, Seth Anthony is serving as the interim Director of Academic Excellence. Seth has been deeply engaged with creating the general education essential studies model. It's very versant in exploring the elements of that. So he's working closely with the chair of the General Education Advisory Council to meet with and talk to departments and programs. Where are the challenges? Some of you may know, for example, there are at least 1 or 2 engineering curriculum where they have an inverted model, where gen ed happens in the upper division. That is very different than that model in terms of how you have to work on it. So they're meeting with and exploring those and conversations about how we can implement the essential studies model without disrupting the curriculum. The other elements, so the exploration of the financial impact. So Seth is also going to meet regularly with the provost leadership team, which is really the senior, those are the deans, the PLT, we call it PLT plus, the deans plus the senior executive team, so all the VPs. So we want to make sure that we have input from all of those folks before we try to implement a model. There are impacts for the registrar's office, enrollment, time to graduation, financial, et cetera. All those elements we're trying to explore all those this year. The goal will be to pilot at least 1 or 2 programs next academic year with the essential studies model. And during also to develop, so one of the critical elements of the essential studies model is the synthesis experience, the junior year synthesis experience, which is an interdisciplinary course that involves, gives the students an opportunity to explore very unique, interesting problems from an interdisciplinary perspective. So this could and probably will involve students from different natures. It'll involve at least 2 faculty. And so exploring how we make that work, because the implications there for faculty and workload, et cetera, are critical. So this year we're piloting 3 of those models, and we're supporting faculty to be co-teaching those models. And I think we're going to see some exciting proposals come forward. As with any plan, the pilots allow you a chance to explore and see what's working well, what needs to be improved. Is the financial model you create to support that viable? Do you need to adjust that? Are students getting the experience you think you're getting? I think we have a wonderful opportunity here, and I just want to point out that most likely one of these projects will include a catalyzed climate project, so it's a wonderful platform. So we have a chance to strengthen a lot of different things, but this year I'm looking to explore, I think 3 to 6, I'm sorry, I don't have the exact detail, SE models in the spring term as a pilot for this most critical part of that. I don't want to speak very much at all. I'll just mention that most of you are aware of House Bill 2998, which is the legislators have asked higher HEC to convene the seven publics, 17 community colleges to develop foundational curriculum to facilitate seamless transfer. Existing models, one size fits all, AAOT and OTM, have not been as successful as both people had desired and hoped for transfer students. And they're trying to better align what students are taking prior to transfer with specific majors in mind. So this is very ambitious because the faculty at each institution had control, and rightfully so, are in charge of the curriculum. And so those changes have to go through an analysis, feedback from the faculty committee, senate, at all the institutions. And they're looking at a very short time, like a year and a half, to make this happen. So again, I think we're going to be very successful in this. I appointed Seth from the provost's office to serve on a transfer working group. And there's all the institutions, there's about 30 members on it. Representation from faculty, from registrar's offices, et cetera. So it's going to be very complicated, and I will give you feedback as we go forward, but I'm optimistic that Oregon Tech will flourish in whatever emerges, and our essential studies model will be intact and thriving after this. So that's a little update. Thank you for your patience on my first couple of months, and a little update also on the new program model, and also potentially having a program review model in place.
Thank you very much. You've been remarkably quiet during the presentation, which is unusual for us, so hopefully we'll make up for it in comments. You presented a lot of different things for us. I really appreciate the benefit of your insight and also the energies that you've already applied to enhancing Oregon Tech. So I think there's a lot of things that you presented to us, but I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is that you specifically asked us, in essence, for some feedback with respect to the process by which we approve new programs. So I think that it behooves us to provide that input, given that we brought that up as something that's a significant concern, both from this committee and from the board in general. So I might need to start at that point and provide some feedback on that, or at least some historical perspective you can see on that. Have a go at that.
Well, I think for me personally, what's valuable as we talk about these in the future is knowing things like really having it highlighted, the potential return on investment, how it will help with student recruitment and or retention, that particular program. And then also being able to have a bigger picture of where it fits into the menu, if you will, of options that students have outside of our institution. So looking at, comparators and that really dialed in, like, if this student is interested in this, these are all the options they would have, perhaps across the Pacific Northwest or in Oregon, and this is why we feel like this in particular is a good fit, and how we can have a comparative advantage, or what comparative advantages we might have over other institutions. Again, getting into that, why are we doing this? What are we going to get out of this, and what are students going to get out of it?
Dan,
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think reviewing the process, and I know that after a couple of degrees came through in the last year, sometimes there were awkward spots in the process, and so I think that, and perhaps I'm not really prepared to talk about where those awkward spots are, but well, I guess I am a little bit in terms of you know, a lot of it was bringing it to the board, and then should it go from the board straight to HEC, or should it go to provost council? Should it, and at what point should those things happen? And so I think that if you can help to streamline that process and help us to, I mean, using some feedback from us like you're getting today, and then helping us understand what you believe makes best sense, I think is an important thing for us. I would say one other thing too, because of the way that the process worked, and this is speaking more from an experience as the chair of a department who had a degree go through in the last year, helping us as a board to have opportunities to speak to those, but then also helping us to understand our responsibility in terms of how deep into the weeds we need to be getting regarding curriculum and other things. I think that would also be beneficial to this particular committee, because it'll come here before it goes to the board, and then helping the board understand that as well.
And I like what Trustee Peterson said about how deep in the weeds to get, because I guess, and this is, you know, somebody who doesn't work for the institution, my perspective would be that we should be evaluating it from the strategic level of how it fits into the strategic plan of the university. And once we get to the point where we decide, yeah, we agree that that's a good fit, I don't know as if, at least from my perspective, whether we need to be dialing into, you know, well, what exactly is that curriculum look like? I mean, at least me personally, I'm not probably going to be able to be of much value to you in that, but Trustee Peterson.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I agree with that, and I think the other part of the piece of the discussion that I don't think that we had very well as a board, or that was presented to us very well, is where it came from. Like, what are the processes? I mean, we saw the signatures on a piece of paper that said it's been through this committee and this committee and this committee, but what does that mean in terms of the support from the institution and or the support from faculty? For example, there's a committee called CPC, the Curriculum Planning Commission. I guess it was a graduate program, would go through the graduate council, but what is, you know, what do those levels mean, and at what level can we understand that it's been reviewed? That's kind of being in response to what you're saying. I really think that that's important for us, so that we have that trust that it's been vetted, and I think that helps keep us out of the weeds.
But I think, though, building on that, the idea that oftentimes there are programs that are started up by one or two faculty members who see a particular need or see a particular opportunity, shall we say, and then it gathers momentum. And then at some point, it's hard for people to step in and ask the more probing and difficult questions, which then will slow it down or stop it. So oftentimes, well, I would say, rarely does a program start and then never make it all the way to the end. So I think part of it's like when you have a piece of paper that you sign and there's 15 other signatures before yours in a process, and you say, I'm just going to sign this because I'm assuming everybody else before me has reviewed this. And I think the similar sort of difficult questions should be aimed at those people who are presenting the program in a variety of different ways.
If I could comment, I thank you. These are very valuable insights into how I would present a program here for review. I do think that there are some already existing checks and balances in terms of, you just mentioned an idea of how some program might emerge, that there is a process to do initial vetting, some executive summary that I think it's a what is it called, process that, you know, Trustee Peterson, to proceed. I'm sorry, I don't know all the documents, but there is a first
Approval to proceed.
Approval to proceed. Here we go. There are some signs in the audience there. Yeah, you're welcome. So approval to proceed provides the first pass of that kind of review. Goes to the provost, And what I would like to do, and again, I respectful of process happened before, I would try to get the senior executive team to look at it also. I mean, my role is to look at it from the academic perspective, also goes to the faculty committee, the curriculum planning commission, or the grad council, to explore it from the angle of, is there really a market? What would the financial constraints look like? Because oftentimes, when you're doing technology-focused programs, there are other things other than salaries and things. There may be equipment, there may be infrastructure. And so faculty, I know when I was a faculty member, the fervor to do something really neat and cool, and I could envision all the great things happening and just jump over all the intermediary steps. So at that point, it either looks like a great idea, go back and now think about a full proposal, or here are some issues that we see that need to be addressed before you put all the energy and time in. And so all that, if we do this process properly, and we do that, then you should feel where I would hope I would not bring anything to you that I didn't feel confident about having the potential to be successful. And again, that vetting process, then a full proposal goes forward, and I believe the full proposal goes to the CPC and all the other faculty governing bodies to look at. Processes are in place. I'm not sure I get how they work on the past. The goal is to make sure that we have that vetting. Someone also brought up, I think, Trustee Mars may have said something, may have mentioned the comparative basis for things. The program proposal document application, I'm assuming, has comparator schools, comparator programs. So there is a sort of an idea of what is needed beyond simply accreditation and all that. That's probably true for a lot of programs, but what will be needed to make this successful? Here are 5 programs that are successful in the US or in whatever region. Here's what they do. Now, we may have a little different, but we can't be so far astray when you look at those. So that helps to tailor the program. The other thing I'd like to have there is an aspirational program. This program here is incredible. We would love to have this one day here in the Pacific Northwest at Oregon Tech. And so that gives you a different level of sense of what you need to do, not just merely to function, but to achieve excellence. And so those are elements I'd like to see in and again, I'm not sure, maybe it's already there, but in those documents. And I do believe allowing, the weaknesses I saw, the places I've been, was that, faculty did not have support for a financial and market analysis, and how much time and energy can they devote to that. If you have experts that can do that, they can bring input in and help that strengthen that proposal. So these are some very good concerns, but I think we can address them very well.
As I recall, I felt like there was some confusion or tension about the role of HEC and timing. Those kinds of things that just kind of threw a wrench into the works and created some confusion. And I don't know if there's a better understanding now of the role, what role HEC continues to have.
Yeah, I think part of it was that the process that currently involves the Provost Council and then HEC, and then to what extent do we even worry what we hear back from the Provost Council, because in essence we can still present something to HEC without Provost Council approval in some sense, not just getting feedback that in response is necessary on that front. But it does tie into what you said in terms of just the timing is kind of critical on this, and I think certainly personally, we're reacting to instances where we've been asked to approve something, and in one case we get something very late, and in other cases we don't get anything, and so we're asked to look at something on the fly, and it puts us in a difficult position because of our responsibilities for the institution to approve something that we've not completely vetted, or at least been given the opportunity to review. And I think that's difficult, because if all goes well, it's not a problem, but if something happens, then ultimately it's on us, because we let you do it. And I think that's an issue. I think some of that can be improved by presenting, as you had intimated, the idea of giving us in advance the idea of, well, we're going to look at this program. Like right now, we have a lot of information about physical therapy, and that helps us. But when we have a program which is like communications, which seems to be disparate and different from the standard fare that we offer, then that presents, a few questions. And having to respond to that in short order, I think puts us in a difficult position we'd rather not be in, knowing that all of these discussions are all taking place on campus, and we should benefit from that at an earlier stage. So basically, like us giving us the opportunity to have a green light saying, okay, we know you're talking about this, and this would be what we would like to see highlighted in a presentation to us, with plenty of time for us to discuss.
So some sort of preliminary idea, and so certainly it would have had to have passed through the several stages of screening, so we don't waste folks' time and things that don't ultimately come to you. But if we are at the stage of vetting a proposal with the CPC, that's the faculty committee, or grad council, would you like to see that at that point, at least an executive summary that would prepare you for, versus getting a document saying, well, we need to vote on this in this session? Would that be a worth?
I think that, along with what the projected timeline would be for that particular, and because that's where we kind of got pushed that we had to hurry and decide on this because it had to be somewhere the next week, or it had to be. So even at that stage, to look at the projected timeline of the meetings at the head of the Provost Council or the board meetings, so that it can follow a normal process rather than be reactive.
And I think that would be beneficial to the departments bringing the request forward, because they'll know if you don't get it to the board by this period of time, and you're planning on starting your program at this specific time in the academic year, it's just, we need to have the time to review it, and it's got to go through a couple of other layers before you could actually start it. So I think timing, like both of you said, is super important. Yeah, really important process. And understanding for us and for the programs.
The other piece that, in my short period of time, I've seen there are 3 monthly statewide provost council. I've seen 3 of them. Proposals were put forward once, and they were merely modifications of existing programs at the institutions. So there was approval pretty easy. I have not seen anything more substantial come through. And my understanding also is that since there is some, well, if I could, I'd like to ask Dean Malpin to speak to this. You said at least longer experience than I have, if that is appropriate. I'm not sure if that's okay. But once that happens, it goes to the HEC. And the HEC, I've been searching for a calendar when they review programs, and I'm not quite sure there is a calendar for when they review programs. So we could have an internal calendar and then put things on agendas as soon as we are able to. And also, I don't know if there's potential to prepare those groups beyond us that we have a proposal coming, if that will help them to expedite moving something forward. And do you want to speak?
Sure. So in my experience over the last year when I was engaged in the Provost Council, there actually was an administrative assistant that was a paid position for the Provost Council. And that individual was very efficient and really good to work with. And she prepared a calendar that actually put the Provost Council meetings in that calendar alongside the HEC scheduled meetings, and then alongside the University Board of Trustees meetings for all of the universities. And the intent there then was to be able to provide lead time for when people could, say, okay, well, Provost Council is April 4th, and I need 6 weeks lead time to get that proposal to the Provost Council, so I need to make sure I have it, so that then it would link to their approval process and then be sent over to the HEC to meet their meeting date. So that was something that was very beneficial. That individual retired in June, and they did not replace the position. And so currently in Provost Council, the chair of Provost Council, who happens to be the new provost at OSU, at Thaser, he's using his internal staff to do that work. And it doesn't seem that they actually have a process in place yet by which there's a calendaring function. And so I think that that's something that they need to determine as the Provost Council and by guidance from HEC, I believe. Then the other end of that, Northwest Accreditation, they do not publish a calendar by which they utilize for program review period. Whatever changes you're going to propose to them, whether it's a substantive change, meaning a new program, whether it's a minor change, whatever that may be, they don't have timelines that say, if you submit by X date, we'll review by Y date. It's just dependent on how many substantive proposals or minor proposals that they actually receive. So there's a very difficult timing process there that we don't really have the ability to drive right now. And so that kind of complicates things even further. So.
But if we expedite and streamline our front end processes, then we move things as rapidly forward. And again, I am not certain of whether we can influence any elements beyond us. One of the discussions that's happened is there's not a lot of funding, so there was sort of a who's volunteering staff to serve in this position of this person retired. There isn't money to support the Provost Council directly. And I look at my staff roster and I don't have anybody that I can offer up. So they've been very good, Ed Fieser at Oregon State, the new provost. He's been very cooperative with everybody. So I don't think that's an issue. But again, Leanne's description of that alignment could help. But I'll do my best to make our own calendar and also promote that so that you're aware of what down the road where we're going to be going with this. And I'll inform you of the statewide Provost Council meetings and also HEC. And I haven't yet had the discussion with the director, Dr. Dujan, about this. This is one item I want to talk to her about. She's going to come in. She visited for the HEC Commission October meeting here, and she's very interested in speaking to us. So I'm going to try to work on streamlining the beyond process. But also, I think that we have some great ideas here with the preliminary preview of what will be coming, so that you'll have time to have input, and also what you wish to see when the actual proposal arrives, probably in the next.
But I think that what we typically see is predicated on having this as a quantized process, that we want to admit students to start this program in the fall of X.
Yeah.
So then we work backwards from that date, and then we try to find the last possible date that we could submit this to get approval. And so we then sort of try to then we pretty much fill up all available space just to meet that final deadline. And I suggest we might think a little bit about some slippage involved so that we could adapt to contingencies. I think the other thing on the other side with respect to timing is I'm always concerned about what the impact is for students in new programs that we propose. So, for example, if we propose a new program and students go into this program and then they ultimately decide to go somewhere else for their major, is there a companion major that the student could easily fold into without having to backtrack and start all over again? So is there a big brother, big sister program in essence? And then the other timing side with respect to program review is when we talk about having to hire new faculty to staff a program, then do we want to have a review process which is longer than the tenure process? i.e. we hire a new person, they come on board, they get tenure, and then we decide that program is no longer viable, and frankly, then they're stuck. So just to ask you, give some consideration to that other side of the time process.
And I just wanna, you made me think of one other thing. I'm really appreciative, Dr. Kulik, of your thoughts on the program review process, because I think it's time for that now. We have some programs that are new that need to, and programs that have been around for a while, that I think they need to understand timelines, and they need to understand what they need to hit in order to, I mean, they made these proposals, but I think it would be nice to have a program review process that helps, that keeps these new programs accountable and moving forward.
I think Dr. Brown's point about basically your discussion is almost around it's important not to have simply completely standalone programs where students have to leave the university because we don't have any comparable transformation. So one of the fascinating discussions I've had, and actually is with Trustees Peterson's Department of Communications, there are programs that we have that could add on to a student's experience, and in fact, they could transfer across. There are others too. And I think that should be a consideration. That's a very valuable one that essentially, whether programs are standalone or not, or appear to be standalone or not, they're actually integrated into the academic spectrum of curriculum. Also, the review process I've seen, and again, you balance out how frequently review with the cost of that review, right? So if for example, it's you need data, you need faculty or staff to write big reports or whatever, and that could take up a significant amount of time. How frequently do you want it? What I've seen is for new programs, there's like a 3-year you need to have a 3-year look in. And built into the program, there have to be standards set. Are you meeting your standards? Why not? Are they the right standards? But then normally when programs have been vetted and are moving forward, then you have at least a 5 or 6 year cycle where all programs must come up. Then you can schedule in the provost office, periodic review, and have folks be ready for that. The other side of this that I've seen that works very well. So a lot of programs have accreditation. And accreditation usually doesn't dive into academic content or those elements. You deal with operational side and whether you're effectively engaging the market or whatever it might be. And that's just a very broad sweep. But another kind of viewpoint is, what if you had external eyes on your program? So you had some independent, unbiased group, could be faculty, mostly faculty, who would come in periodically to look at strategically, are you doing what you think you're doing from all perspectives? So I had science programs that did not have accreditation agencies. And so it was primarily undergraduate programs. So we contracted with Council Undergraduate Research has 20 years experience in program review, putting teams across the nation together to review, let's say, a chemistry or biology program. And they would come in for a site visit, and the charge rests with the dean and provost. What do you wish to accomplish? And I made it that strategic visioning. What is the department? They create a strategic plan and vision, which of course is going to fit in with the universities. And that is what the external reviewers will do. And it gives a perspective that is really very unique. And it is faculty driven, so that the faculty have a deep involvement in this. So it goes beyond the financial review. I mean, those things go in parallel. But I found those to be useful, having been on both ends of them. It's expensive. So you have to calculate, is that going to cost money? You don't do that initially, but that could be part of an academic program review. And I think it might be valuable for the board to see something like that, for external eyes looking in and saying, yeah, this program is going in the wrong direction. That's why you're not getting students. or something like that. It's not really driven by a market. It may be the program may have structural elements that need to be reconsidered. So
I think it's a good idea. I'm always mindful of this, what you had mentioned before, faculty time. And so the more you can couple that with something that's already existing, like an accreditation visit from ACS or ABET or whomever we have as a program body, might be fine. But I think also, and it ties into some of the other things that you've mentioned, that the idea of getting input from students is critical. And in this case, it's probably recent graduates or recent employers of people, and trying to see how well we are preparing the students to be productive on day one or year two, so to speak. So I think those things are also important. I do very much like the idea of having some mileposts and some standards by which we measure ourselves. But we also quote the great philosopher Mike Tyson, who said, everybody has a plan, but plans change the first time you get punched in the mouth. So at some point we do have to change plans if necessary, because circumstances change.
And I'm not as familiar with the engineering types of accreditation, but I know with the health sciences accreditation, they do dig very deeply into the academic content as far as, yeah, I mean, so far down into the weeds that, so I think that probably could suffice for whatever the internal review program might be also at the university level. But they really do dig down into every course objective and every outcome.
do they, I'm not as familiar with that as with ABET, for example. I think ABET, it's not a charge to think about faculty professional development, because in essence, faculty professional development can drive the success of the program. Because they're so integral to it, and also they are connecting with students. But do they provide insight into the faculty professional development side? Like, this program does not support faculty development. It's merely, if I can use the term, it's a perpetual student graduating cycle. It does not, because frankly, faculty need to keep up in their disciplines. Faculty need to be encouraged, and many of them are very good at this. What are you doing in your discipline creatively? That feeds into your pedagogy. It feeds into everything. I didn't see any of that in ABET. And so again, I'm not arguing that you don't do accreditation, but there may be other elements that may be valuable that bring in into the discussion, because the totality of the picture is, it involves the university, the faculty, the students, and everybody else to support that. So to me, that was very important in these external visits from non-accredited, user non-accrediting bodies, but it helped that aspect.
Yeah, I think Jeremy's comment about the faculty time involved in multiple reviews of, delving into the program, and faculty are already stretched just to deliver the message and to get students to where they need to be to pass board exams or to graduate or whatever the case may be. Any way that you can overlap current reviews through accreditation or other means that are already happening from an external point to suffice for the internal review, or to not have a whole separate delving. I mean, for most of the accreditation reviews, it's a 2-year self-study. It's very time consuming. And so to complete that and feel that relief, and then all of a sudden say, oh, well, next month the university is reviewing us. It's kind of like, let's gear up again.
Yeah,
that's really,
yeah, it's a real challenge. And I think, there are multiple ways to deal with this. One perspective that I think accreditation provides, which is a good one, is for example, like a continuous improvement. Like, you are using the student outcome evaluations you're doing every year to drive improvement in your program. So it's actually, it should drive that continuous improvement and not be we haven't done anything 5 years in reviewing our program. Now all of a sudden we've got this thing on the horizon and we're now going to do something. Let's go back and collect data. You try to get away from that behavior because that behavior does not, in the long run, benefit the department or the faculty. You know, it's sort of the whole perspective of creating, essentially, if you think of an e-portfolio of some sort, whether it's faculty, whether it's departmental, that you do that in a way, but you cannot avoid the wrenching effect of some kind of accreditation visit. But you can mesh them. I think Chair Brown said that too. You can mesh those and avoid having that.
Any other thoughts, comments? Great. Well, thank you so very much for providing your input and also for listening to us. And I look forward to working and providing feedback in the future as we develop this procedure for the program with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to move along, and one of the presentations we've had of this committee that really struck a nerve with people and got us all thinking about student success and also affordability was the textbook. And so I'm delighted to have a reprise of that and see where we are in terms of, I guess, textbook affordability with respect to online open source textbooks. Thanks and welcome back.
Thank you.
I'd like to start by just asking if there's something in particular you'd like to know so I can be as focused as possible. Shall I just charge away?
I think we were very much, and speaking for myself, so this is the royal we were very much excited about the idea of the efforts taking place on campus with respect to open source textbooks. And so is there an update from that, which is an arrow pointing in the right direction, or are we mired still in administrivia, or are there other things that are getting in the way that we might be able to provide feedback or help you push the wheel around?
I think that gives me something to go by. I think one thing that sort of speaks volumes maybe is the fact that I am just a math professor, the person here talking to you. So what that points to is that there's nothing centralized, no centralized way of dealing with this. It's kind of a funny coincidence that we all got an email 2 days ago that this is Open Education Resource Week, and it has a survey on who's using them and to what extent, and the survey won't be over until the end of the week, so I have no data in that regard. I did kind of a sort of a feeler with some people on the curriculum and CCT, which is the Commission on College Teaching, and basically what they had to say is that there's things going on. There are people starting to adopt open resource texts. Again, there's no way of knowing who or to what extent. One thing I did to prepare is I went to our webpage, I looked at the course search for this term, and one thing that's supposed to appear according to House Bill 2871 or whatever the number is courses are supposed to be tagged if they are low or no cost. Low seems to be $40 for this. And there's no tagging on our webpage as far as I can tell. I don't know who's responsible for that. So that's something simple that could be done. The bottom line, I think, really is that faculty are very busy, they work hard, and usually they'll just go to the default, which is the Sure text that they've been using for years. Apparently, other schools are offering stipends that range from small to fairly large. The smallest for just purely adopting an open source platform or text. A little more if they take one that exists and maybe modify it to suit their program, and even more if they just develop something on their own. We have nothing like that, which again can come from the fact that it's not really owned by anybody. So I think that's kind of a brief synopsis.
So, sorry, but if we look at House 7998, House Bill, which talks about commonalities between courses that are offered, might that provide another avenue by which we could have a course like, I don't know, Psychology 101 that is not too dissimilar across all of the institutions of higher education in the state, that has a book that is developed by faculty member at X that we could all use in some sense?
That's been addressed. So in the original House bill, there was money for, to hire a statewide person. And that person is Teresa Wolf, who used to be on our faculty. And so has, I believe, a 2-year position that may have been extended. But anyway, there was money. They found the 30 highest enrollment courses across all the universities, and they gave out money to either develop or find things in that regard. So I don't know what that ended up resulting in, but certainly the state has already focused that way. But I'm aware of that. I don't know what the awareness is on the rest of our campus.
Because it also seemed to me that if we could, and I've said this I don't know how many times, but if we could have something at Oregon Tech, a goal perhaps of saying that on average we should have an open source textbook program such that every student would have at least one open source textbook throughout the year. So a student might save $100 in a year. That might be the biggest factor that we could, as a board, make for college affordability, especially in light of tuition increases, etc. But I don't think we're anywhere close to that. It would be nice to see what sort of data that we have in terms of how many students are affected by, maybe DP Foley has that data about how many students are affected or are able to use open source textbooks and therefore lowering the cost of their education.
I don't have data on the open source usage aspect, but in terms of other ways to reduce the costs for students, the bookstore, if you remember, is run by Follett, so they're a third party for us. They have other options other than outright buying a textbook. Like back in the day when we were buying textbooks, that was the only option, right? You can rent a textbook, you can get it digitally. They also do a price match program. So if a student finds a textbook on their phone cheaper, they'll get that price, and the difference then is an amount that they can use in the bookstore. And so there are some efforts, and I can give you numbers on the usage of those other types of textbook options. So for digital, 167, this is for fall, 167 students are using a digital source. That's about 5%. Rented textbooks, 1,070, so that's 31%. And then sold, we can't break out new or used, obviously a used book is cheaper. Those are 2,246 or 65%. So, over last 3 years, those numbers for digital and rentals have increased. And we can certainly have the bookstore come in and present their efforts that way. So I think open source is one way that, obviously it's the cheaper way, but there's a lot of work to make that available. But the bookstore is trying to do things to reduce the cost. I don't know if Liam's had an experience with any of the other types of textbook options than just buying a textbook.
There's been 1 or 2 engineering courses I took last year. There's strength of materials and statics, and we just used online. And it wasn't even a textbook, it was just an online resource that was a website that had examples and lectures on there. But I've also used price match in the bookstore and saved probably close to a couple $100. I don't know how many people know about that though.
But I would imagine, or maybe Trustee Mason has some insight from the health sciences, but many of the disciplines that we have, it's kind of nice to have a textbook that you keep because you use it later on in life when you've graduating or even maybe doing graduate school, just as a referral.
Yeah, I think, for the most part, certainly with this generation of students, that really like the online, being able to do it online. Transporting the textbooks is much easier back and forth to school, without doubt. I think, you know, with the health sciences, I think there's all that thought about, yes, I'd like to keep this textbook for future reference, maybe have all things that don't change as much. But personal experiences, it goes in a box, you never look at it again. And if you were to want to look up something specific, you're gonna Google it, you're gonna search on the internet, you're gonna go to Medscape, or you're gonna go to some other source, probably then pull out that textbook unless you are over 50. And then you might think about it. But I think it's more some of the faculty feel like those textbooks are more valuable to the students than they are, because I think what we realized is that there were a lot of courses, we ordered the number of textbooks, we have a very finite program, so you know exactly how many students are in every class and how many are gonna be in every class. That they were only selling 30-40% of the textbooks that were ordered for that course, so students weren't even purchasing them. So they were either getting them from an upperclassman or borrowing or sharing or whatever to try to save them. So, I think there's a lot of underlying pieces that go on with the student life. About what's most valuable, so, maybe even using the students as a resource to send them and ask them what they use or would be easiest.
From a faculty perspective, just to add to what Greg said, I do think that the faculty on our campus or at the institution are fairly aware of textbook costs. I mean, I think sometimes it can't be avoided, other times it can, but I think many of the faculty are thinking about, okay, how can I reduce the cost for my student, whether it be an open educational resource book or something online, whether it be bookstore. I do think that faculty, and I'm hearing more and more of these kinds of discussions on campus. The OER is not always the option that everybody uses, but I've been surprised too in the conversations that I've had with people that some of them are using these, and I didn't even realize they were, especially in my discipline where we teach a lot of general education. I have one faculty member in my department that's been taking a pretty close look at those open educational resource materials so that just try to bring that cost down for students. And so I feel that our faculty are paying attention to that, but maybe not at the level that they could be. But they are mindful.
But I think part of it goes back to the idea that, as we all know, faculty are busy doing other things, and so it's developing an open source textbook for which there's no sort of recognition, shall we say, pecuniary or otherwise, then it's a question of how do you prioritize that.
Right.
And I think the other part is that if we do adopt a textbook, then is it a textbook that could be used in a sequence of math classes, for example, or is it a book that we're going to, I guess, commit to for 2 years so that students who buy it can know that they're going to be able to sell it back? So those sorts of things. But it would be nice if we could get that data for our next meeting or whenever it's available from the survey, and also just to encourage the registrar to, or whomever, if we're not yet flagging those courses, to be able to do that. Anything else? Thank you so very much. Appreciate it. Now we're going to hear briefly about the support that we provide for veterans and the VP focus.
So a very brief update on veteran student support. Let me first give you some numbers because I always get asked how many veterans we have. So total, we have 298 veterans or dependents of veterans that we are aware of. And so it gets to be a little interesting because oftentimes it's self-reporting if they're not using VA benefits that we're tracking. So by campus, we have 118 pendants using whoever's benefit. Wilsonville, 119, Boeing 7, Chemeketa 4, online 50. So that's kind of the number. So if I focus primarily on Klamath Falls, let me explain the difference between a student program and a student club. So a club, anybody can participate in a club, as well as a program. A club, however, they do their own thing wherever around campus. A program receives additional funding from student government, and they have a physical space. Most of those spaces are here in the College Union. So the Student Veterans Program is downstairs on this end of the building, accessible from the outside, right at the bottom of the stairs on the south end. So they've been a program now about 8 years, I think. And so what that means is that they have students that run the program. In the case of the Student Veterans Program, there's 5 student officers, and those are paid positions. An advisor who is a staff member on campus who also is a veteran. And they run the space. They have students that come in and open up the area pretty much from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., maybe later depending on the term. And so then the veterans or anyone who's wanting to interact with veterans can come down and hang out. There's a refrigerator, microwave, so they can put lunch in there. They can go down and have lunch. They can study in there. There's computers. Then there's also resource materials available, but it's not staffed by a full-time or even half-time staff person. It's all student run. So we supplement the support down there with a veteran certifying official. So that's to get benefits if they're using any of the VA chapters, whatever they may be. That person has moved from the registrar's office to financial aid. And so Mindy is the certifying official currently. So a lot of other campuses have a Veterans Resource Center coordinator, and we don't. But right now the Oregon Department of Veterans Affairs has a grant proposal request out there that would give us $100,000, some of which could be used for a position. So we're looking at how that might fit for us. The unfortunate side is a one-time $100,000 max to spend over 18 months. So we put all these things in, and then poof, the money's gone. So we either supplement it ongoing other coffers, or we don't provide whatever we did with that $100,000, right? So it's kind of an awkward situation to be in. That proposal is due November 21st, so we have 3 weeks to make sense of that. We also have a Veterans Action Committee on campus, and that's staffed, or members of that include 3 faculty in this SVP, Student Veterans Program Advisor, and then the student officers of the SVP. They meet a couple times a term to address what are the issues for veterans that they're hearing, either directly from the students or others on campus, to help kind of mitigate some of the hurdles, if you will, that the veterans are facing. And it's just good timing that Mark and Bill are here. They also popped down. They're counselors in our counseling center, and they come down and spend time in the veterans area. I don't know if they're on a set schedule this term or not, but they've come down and just kind of hung out. But if there's somebody needing to talk, then they're available. So I'll stop there. Well, let me add one more thing. So the students, they make the space available for other students, but then they also do things for the community. They've been active with Memorial Day. They did a fundraiser and sold flags, and then all sold flags they put out. So if you were here in late May, you saw rows and rows and rows of flags out on the grass just on the west side of the CU at the top of the hill. They do a annual Nerf Wars game that they open it up to everybody on campus. That's now a very popular event. It's so big it goes around the gym instead of rooming the College Union. So they're not here just working with vets. They're here interacting with the other students as well. So now I'll stop, answer any questions.
Are there any overlaps with the ACC down the road in terms of sort of joint activities or sharing support, et cetera?
Not that I'm aware of, other than through the community. There's, Bill, help me, what's the red and blue flag group? The guy that came into the orientation session last year, remember?
I don't know that I'm familiar with that.
You don't know who I'm talking about?
No, I don't.
Okay, I can't remember their name. There's a community group that I know there's members from.
Oh, that, you talking about Team Red, White, and Blue?
Yeah, red, white, and blue.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think there's KCC people there, but we have not shared resources. We could. Yeah.
Are there identified needs that you've seen that we're not meeting in terms of our veterans?
Most of what I'm hearing from the veteran students is the timeliness of getting their benefits. And I don't know that we have much control over that. The VA is oftentimes slow and they have lots of rules. One of which is you can't drop a class if you're not doing well. So they end up having to stick it out and get the poor grade, which doesn't help them. Or if it's the voc rehab program, they can drop it, but they might have to pay back the funds. And so those are things that we can work through our legislative side to try to change, but that's the number one complaint, is how long it takes to receive their benefits.
This is, the first thing I thought about, and it may just be totally off base, when I saw that you were going to do this presentation was, are special needs? Like if somebody's had it's a big issue with me personally, a traumatic brain injury.
Yep.
And so they have special needs met, in the classroom.
Yeah, so about 2 years ago, we did a session for faculty and staff that addressed some of those issues that veterans have as they relate to the classroom setting. So that veterans may sit in a particular location. They may need to react differently and leave the room and not to cause any alarm. So we haven't done that session recently. Like I said, it's been about 2 years, so we need to bring it back. I think that's a great piece of this grant potential. And so yeah, there's to communicate and help faculty best support veterans. That's an important piece, and we will do that again. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate hearing that we do listen to the voices of our veterans and we do respond, so thank you.
They're a great bunch to have on campus. Thank you.
Of course, we're running late.
So much for your 2 minutes.
So we lost flying this morning. So I would suggest we take a 10-minute break and 11:05, 10:05. So 10:05, let's get back together and start up again. Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was texting with the whole man.
She said she's in Bill Lang. She's, so she's local though.
No.
She's.
Why?
Not far, but she's okay. We'll just let you. Get it.
Can see that one.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. You'll be warm.
It's 10:05, how about that? So, we're right on schedule to have a great presentation about student healthcare and what we provide at the healthcare setting. So, if you are willing to stand up in front of us and give us a summary of services we provide and also some trends, I guess, that you're observing.
Absolutely. So hello, my name is Galen Moore. I'm the director of the Integrated Student Health Center. So I have been tasked with sort of giving you an overview of what we do and looking at trends over time. So let's start with sort of the logistics. Two spaces, one here at Clemens Falls campus and then one at the Portland Metro. That's hard to get out instead of Wilsonville, so bear with me. Here on campus, we have sort of your hours 8 to 5. At Portland Metro, though, it varies because we want to accommodate the needs of the students who often have the evening classes. And so we have a more flexible schedule there. We are what they call an auxiliary unit. So what that means is that we are funded solely by student fees. So there's a mandatory fee for students who take 6 or more on-campus credits. They automatically pay the fee each term. And that allows them to be seen by any of my staff with no copay, no cost, no insurance, no anything like that. So they're able to be seen, without having to pay because they've already incorporated those fees into the student fee. Students who are less than 6 credits have the option of opting in for the health fee. Some of our online students who actually are physically near Klamath Falls sometimes do this as well. So they have the option to opt in and pay the fee and then utilize the services. We really don't bill insurance, which is, I think, a nice thing for the students because even if they have no insurance, then they're already eligible for the services. And so insurance doesn't become sort of a hindrance or an obstacle to know that that could be. And then the Portland Metro campus has a separate health fee just for that campus, which is obviously much lower because what that does is that funds the full-time counselor in that space. So they have a much lower fee than our Klamath Falls campus does because we offer more services here on campus here. So here in Klamath Falls, in terms of the medical aspect, we really operate similar to a primary care physician's, your regular doctor's office, and so needs that students have that they would normally have gone and seen their regular physician back home, we can meet those needs here in the medical clinic. Staffing, we have a full-time 9-month advanced practice nurse who can write prescriptions and do the diagnostics and referrals and everything else that the medical doctor can do. We have a full-time 9-month registered nurse. We do have a medical doctor who comes 8 hours a week. And so for those more advanced cases or students who maybe have a little bit more in-depth questions, they can see the medical doctor. And we contract with a psychiatric advanced practice nurse as well. So she is one of the very few psychiatric resources in town, actually. She comes here 8 hours a week as well and deals with more of our more complex mental health issues that the students are dealing with. So, I'm not going to read all of this, but basically, like I said, we operate very similar to a primary care physician's clinic. We can prescribe medication so students can take it literally across the street to Sky Lakes to the pharmacy or to any of the other local pharmacies as well. We do procedures, ear irrigation, ingrown toenail removal, things like that. We do have a nebulizer on site for students if they're having trouble breathing, so we can start there, but if we do feel like it is more of an imminent issue, we'll get them across the street to Sky Lakes. We do draw blood on site, which is nice for students. They don't have to go out in the community to a lab to have that done. We do it right here on site. We do immunizations on site. Different from a primary care's office, we actually offer women's health as well, so we do women's annual exams. We prescribe contraception and all of those pieces. So that's a nice piece as well, so they don't have to go find a specialist in town for that. And again, those psychiatric services are available for students who come with medications to deal with things like bipolar or schizophrenia or ADHD, more complex things. Also, the second kind of aspect of the clinic is health promotion. And we do that on both campuses. So here, we have a 3/4 time health educator, and what she does is spearheads the Choose Well program. So Choose Well is a NASPA award-winning program that encourages students to make good choices. Research tells us that students who commit to doing something are more likely to follow through. And so what we do at our events is we have a list of several healthy behaviors, and we encourage them to pick one of those behaviors to engage in. And then we email them a month later to see if they did. So we hold them accountable a little bit. It's sort of research-driven. It has been shown to change behavior, not just increase awareness. We have a big 10 by 10 tent that says Choose Well, and so at those, it's, you know, sort of gets attention, but also we encourage them to make those good choices. The health educator can also meet with students one-on-one for these kinds of things. So if students maybe are gluten-free, they're trying to figure out how to navigate our marketplace and what kinds of things to eat, she can meet with them one-on-one, can design an exercise plan, tobacco cessation, all of those kinds of things. Healthy Active Challenge, we run that in January, and it's designed to encourage students and faculty and staff actually too, to just become more active and engage in those healthier behaviors. Not so much Biggest Loser. It's not a weight challenge. We don't put them on scales and anything like that. But we encourage them to do things like reduce their caffeine intake and increase their number of steps a week. So it's a team-based activity, and there's a winner each week, and then at the end there's a huge winner. So it's kind of fun. So we do that on both campuses. But on the Portland Metro campus, our full-time counselor spearheads the sort of day-to-day health promotion pieces there. But then the health educator travels up once a term to Portland Metro to help support that too. So the last aspect of the clinic, or Integrated Student Health Center, is the mental health component, and this we also do at both sites. I was going to say, I will pass around our annual report from this year, so this has more in-depth data. You're welcome to take a look as I go through. Staffing here in Klamath Falls, currently I have 2 full-time counselors and 2 part-time counselors here in Klamath Falls, and then I have a full-time counselor up in Portland Metro. So, and I also function as a counselor as well. I have a licensed professional counselor. Sorry.
Didn't get your book.
Well, thanks for that. That's why it has that little vinyl cover. I function as a counselor as well. I'm a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Oregon, and so I also see clients. And as we go through the staffing, you'll see that has sort of been a consistent theme. So what does the mental health staff do? They assess mental health issues. They generate diagnoses, and we actually engage in treatment plans for mental health disorders. Our sessions are confidential, which means that we're not only bound by FERPA, we're bound by HIPAA as well. And so parents, faculty, other staff members who are, trying to be helpful, but try to find information, we're just not allowed to confirm or deny that they've even walked in the door. There's no maximum number of sessions that is unique, because many college counseling centers actually have 6 to 8 sessions is the most that a student can engage in, but we actually have no maximum number of sessions. We are available for crisis management. So in the moment, if a student is experiencing a crisis, they can come right up and receive services immediately. We'll talk in a little bit, but we've had faculty and staff who walk the students literally up the hill to us here, or take them to our Portland Metro counselor to get them immediate help right then. We also facilitate mental health screening. So once a month, we come out of the building and meet students where they are, often here in the CU. And we do things like anxiety screening, depression screening, alcohol screening, eating disorder screening. There's a lot of them. So in that way, we're able to reach students who maybe we never would have interacted with in sort of our traditional setting. Here in Klamath Falls, we offer attention deficit, ADHD, we'll just go with that, and learning disabilities testing available here for a fee. So some of our students who come seeking accommodations and don't have documentation can actually receive that service from us here at the student home. So you might be wondering, well, why do we need all of this? So this information, we administered the National College Health Assessment last year on campus. It was a really good response rate. So last year on the NCHA, 58% of our students indicated that they felt overwhelming anxiety in the last year. 35% indicated that they had been so depressed it was hard to function. 11% of our female students indicated they'd used the morning after pill, thinking that they had conceived the night before. 45% of our students are obese or overweight, so that's almost half of our student body that have a significant health issue there. 10% of our students seriously considered suicide in the past year, and we'll talk more specifically about what we've seen in the counseling center in terms of suicide. About a third of our students that we worked with in counseling report having experienced some kind of trauma or abuse either previously or more recent. 34% endorse, so again, a little over a third, saying that they had sleep issues that were very difficult. And then these are things that academics were impacted by. So anxiety was a little over a quarter, depression at 17%, cold and flu kind of right at that was 18%. So our students are they're dealing with some pretty big issues and things that could impact their academics very readily. Last year then, what did we look like? We had 1,634 counseling appointments and 1,521 medical appointments, which represents about 36% of our campus at Klamath Falls that utilized their services in the last year. So we see a lot of students, but are we helping them? So working with Farouk in institutional research, he's provided that first-time freshman retention rate from fall 2016 to this fall is 80%, 79.9%, which is really pretty good.
Is that full-time or just first?
That's first-time, full-time freshmen, and this is Klamath Falls students, undergrad, so none of the graduates. So if you look at retention rates for students who received any student health service, we're actually a little higher than the campus retention rate, so that's 84%. Students who received any medical service from us in the last year were retained at an 86% retention rate. And students who received counseling services were retained at a 78% retention rate, which actually is pretty interesting because I understand that that's lower than the campus rate. But if you think about the kind of students that we're seeing and the issues that they deal with, it's actually really high. And if you look at that number nationally, that's a really high retention rate in terms of the number of students that we're supporting. So I've been asked to put a spotlight on counseling a little bit. So we'll take a look at that. So you might be wondering, what kinds of things do we see students for? So you can see Klamath Falls campus is here in the dark blue. Portland Metro is in the sort of gold. Out of the clients that we saw in the last year, obviously, kind of the biggest main issue that we see students for is anxiety. Now, I want to clarify that this is not just someone being stressed. This is not someone that's feeling overwhelmed because they have the academic rigor that we have here at Oregon Tech. This is diagnosable disorders. So, obsessive compulsive disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, panic disorder, all those kinds of things. So almost half of what we see has to do with anxiety. Now I should say these are not mutually exclusive, which means that any student can have more than one, which they often do. Second is mood disorder, and so that has to do with major depression, bipolar, things of that nature. Many of them come to us with an academic problem. Now, it can be that they have a mental health issue that is impacting their academics, or that their academics is impacting their mental health, so it goes both ways. But you can see as we go through kind of the things that we're looking at, there are others, but these are the primary. You can see that in terms of the PTSD, that history of abuse, primarily here at Klamath Falls campus, as opposed to Portland Metro. But you can see all the different things that we're helping them deal with. So I want to spotlight some of the highest risk things that we've seen. So I'm going to start with suicidal ideation. Obviously, that's a topic that is very important to us. It's out in the media. We know there are community folks who committed suicide recently, and we're part of the community. So what we have seen, this is broken down between Klamath Falls and Portland Metro clearly. So increase since 2014 in terms of thinking about ending their life. So you can see last year, for instance, a little over a quarter of the students we saw in counseling. So this is students seen in counseling. This is not just the general sporting tech population. Over a quarter then, which was 60 students, who told us in session they were thinking of ending their life. So that's to varying degrees. Maybe they're just thinking death would be easier and they wouldn't have to deal with everything, all the way up to having a plan and intent. You can see the numbers are slightly lower at the Portland Metro campus. In terms of being actively suicidal, these are students who have developed a plan for how they would do this and have an intent to actually act on that plan. So you can see these numbers are going down. So there's an increase in thinking about suicide, decrease in the number of students who are actually planning to do that. So that's a good trend. We like to see that. So there's 9 students then last year that we were working with. We had a few transports to the emergency room because they were imminently suicidal and we really felt like they were at risk. We had a few students who, actually there was one student last year who had just purchased the means. He had a very complicated plan on how he was going to end his life and he missed his bus. And instead he came and saw us. And he ended up turning over the means to that he had for the suicide and he's actually doing great today. So. And then I just want to show you the range of this. So this is the number of sessions that this was brought up within the same student. So 2014, we had 1 to 16 sessions within one person, or several. There were several that were pretty elevated. And you can see that these have decreased over time as well, a little bit as well. So it's not happening as often, so we're happy to see that. Other students that are at risk that we tend to work with over the last 2 years, we've worked with 8 students who were raped that year. 2 students who were experiencing sexual coercion, 7 who were actively dealing with domestic violence or relationship abuse, and 7 who are dealing with stalking issues. So these are pretty intensive issues. You can see how these kinds of things have the potential to impact academic progress. And you can see how, if these students didn't get the help they did, these numbers might look very different. And it only takes 1 or 2 suicides on a campus to really start to impact how that university is seen. So we're glad to see that these numbers are coming down, for sure. In terms of trends, we know research has told us for years that college students are coming to us with more fully developed mental health issues. And the national trend is truly to increase staffing in college counseling centers because of this increased need. The more severe mental health issues are coming to us. And so, but if we look over the last, again, sort of from 2013, at the number of intakes, so these are new students coming to us for support. You can see now the Portland Metro is pretty consistent. She's one person, so there's only so many that she can do, but she does a great job. But here, if you look, there was a decrease in 2014-15, and then it's just only skyrocketed since then. And if you take that into consideration in a minute, what we talk about in terms of staffing and what we looked at over staffing, it's fairly impressive that we're meeting the needs of the students. More of them are coming to us, and clearly we're headed in that direction. Staffing changes over time then, and we'll start with Klamath Falls and we'll get to Portland Metro in a moment. Originally, we were part of counseling and testing. It was not part of the Integrated Student Health Center. That didn't even exist. And at that time, they had 2 full-time, there was a psychologist and a master's level counselor. 2008, the Integrated Student Health Center was created, so medical and counseling merged along with health promotion. So same 2, master's level and the psychologist. 2009, we added another master's level counselor that was a director as counselor. And you flash forward a little bit, and so that's when I became director, and so at that time there were some personnel changes that happened, and it dropped down to half-time FTE, that was me. So I was the counselor at the time. We were able to hire a counselor in March, and that increases back to 1.5, but if you remember the trend on the last slide, we were seeing an increase in intakes even at that time. Last fall, we got another full-time counselor, and what we decided to do is we took the psychologist position because we've been unable to fill that. It's very difficult to fill a psychologist level position here in the community where we live. So we broke it into 2 places, and we contracted the school psychologist to conduct the learning disabilities assessments, and then we created another master's level position, so that was able to fund 2 reserve positions. And then now we've just filled this vacant position from last year, so I'm very excited about that. And I wanted to point out that Dr. Trevor Peterson, who is on faculty here and is in the room, has been interning with us for several years and has recently became a licensed psychologist. And so I appreciate that. I have a counselor that's dropped to part-time due to family issues, and so currently I'm still director as counselor in addition to that. For the Metro, much more straightforward. 2013, we started with a part-time counselor and we moved her full-time in 2015. So again, that's who we are and what we do. Are we having an impact? This is the Counseling Center Assessment of Psychological Symptoms. And this assessment is utilized in counseling centers on university campuses across the country. It's been normed over 150,000 students. And so we implement this assessment with our students when they come to the counseling center. So this is Klamath Falls. We'll get to Portland Metro momentarily. So it's administered at their first session and every 4th session after. So what this is showing is there's statistically significant improvement in our clients among these types of issues from session 1 to session 4. So academic distress, depression, generalized anxiety, hostility, social anxiety. And we do have a large number of autistic spectrum students, I think primarily due to the nature of what our majors are. But that is a big component of what we do is help those students. And then just overall distress. So we are actually able to help them reduce the level of distress that these are causing them. And then in terms of the Portland Metro campus, same thing, statistically significant improvement across these issues. Some slightly different, but again, so we're actually having an impact by working with these students. We also implemented discharge surveys for students who meet their therapeutic goals. Last year, 53 of those students completed the survey. We started about mid-year. Again, 92% reported statistically significant reductions in their distress level from when they first came until when they're leaving. 80% indicated that they were quite a bit to very much more confident that they can actually address that same issue when it affects them later in life, which it will, as a result of having attended the counseling. And 100% of these 53 students have graded us an A on an A to F scale, so that's kind of exciting. So I was asked to speak briefly about maybe obstacles to mental health in the Klamath Falls community specifically. So as I mentioned before, resources in town are poor. Many of the providers in town are unlicensed. We have students who have gone into the community for counseling and who come back to us and anecdotally report that they very much prefer us over them because we are very familiar with the student population. We understand what they're going through. And we have worked with college students on very similar issues, so we have a high success rate. Really, if you want to think about what the biggest obstacle in the community is, it's the long wait times. So KBBH is our community mental health center. They're kind of the go-to place in the community for mental health. They have a 3-month wait for an intake. That's a whole term. So if a student tries to get in to get some assistance or get on medication, and they can't do anything about it until the following term, they may not even make it that term. And 6 months for a psychiatrist. Like I said, we were very blessed to have one that we contract on staff that they can see, and she comes every week. So that's a great resource that we have here. Students also report to us that appointments are often frequently canceled or rescheduled. It's very inconsistent. So it's definitely not ideal for the kind of need that our students are displaying. Also, here in Klamath Falls, we don't have any psychiatric hospitalization. Sky Lakes, the ER will take them. If they are imminently suicidal, they'll hold them overnight, medicate them, and send them back into the community. I have a student of mine who tried to overdose on pills 2 years ago. We got him to the hospital, he stayed overnight, and he came back across the street, And he could barely walk straight because he was so high on the drugs they had given him that that's what they did. They just sent him away. We do have a transitional place that'll hold them 1 to 3 days in the community, but it's very difficult beyond that to get them other help. So what we are faced with then is to stabilize them ourselves because we don't have the support resources in the community to do that for us. Again, we are experts on the college population. These providers, that's not something that's necessarily something in their wheelhouse. We also are very familiar with the resources that we have on campus, so I can refer someone to the ROC, or I can refer them to the Tech Opportunities Program, or to Peer Consulting, and get them some academic support. And we have those collaborations within the university, whereas external people just don't know how to navigate our system necessarily. Insurance is an issue, obviously, if they're going into the community. Often it's going to be an insurance-based service. What we have found, honestly, on the medical side, students really know what their insurance is. Often, many times, they're on their parents' insurance. And so if they're wanting their visit to the health center, either medical or counseling, to be anonymous, then they're not wanting to use insurance. But if they go into the community and have to use insurance, then clearly their parents are going to know that they're seeking mental health support, which may not be a bad idea, but they may not want that to happen. And they've surveyed college students, and 61% say that, yes, this is something that's really critical to their success in college, having access to that on campus. And so, you know, I know it is hard enough to get students to just walk up the hill, much less go out into the community, find a provider that's on their plan, figure out what their copay is going to be, or try to navigate that system. So those are obstacles to the community. So what do we offer that's unique? Well, we do a lot of documentation for students. So students who might have something going on in their life, they put in a medical withdrawal to Dean Foley, and we are able to provide that documentation if we've been working with them to say, yes, this has been hindering their academics. They really should be able to drop those classes. Also, we will partner with Disability Services quite a bit. So again, we have the ADHD testing and the LD testing that we offer, but also just our regular clients who are diagnosable in terms of depression and anxiety accommodations. We can provide that documentation as well. We have an increase in emotional support animal requests for students that are living on campus. And so we work with Residence Life and are able to provide our insight as to whether or not clinically that would be therapeutically helpful for them. And then, of course, obviously, the testing itself, which Integrated Student Health Center supplements that. So for the learning disabilities testing, for instance, if you go in the community, and we priced it all around the state, it can be upwards of $2,000. It's a very long process. So we were able to contract with the person and negotiate a rate of $800. And what we do is the students pay $200 and Student Health subsidizes the rest. So it's a pretty minimal cost for them for something that can serve them well, not only here, but also future when they go into employment. The counseling staff are the only staff on campus that are confidential in terms of Title IX reporting. So if I have a student who's been sexually assaulted and she wants to get some support, but she doesn't want to tell anybody about it, they can come to us. So if this didn't exist on campus, there would be nowhere that a student could come to get support without having to make a formal report. And then that immediate support that we're here on campus that they can access, sort of readily. So Dean Foley refers students to us quite frequently. Faculty, again, they walk students up. Residential Life and Housing, we work with their staff very closely. Again, Student Success Center, so that's Disability Services, the TRIO program called Tech Opportunities Program, the ROC, Campus Safety. So we work very closely with those campus partners. And across the last 2 years, over half of the crises that came to us came because a faculty or staff member actually physically walked them to us. So they are utilizing us as a service, and we're able to intervene pretty readily in that way. So that's a lot of information in a short amount of time. So what questions do you have for me?
I have a question related to the insurance issue.
Sure.
You mentioned that that you don't bill insurance and you just sort of don't get into that world.
Yeah.
But I was curious as to what you thought about what the value might be of helping students get signed up for something that they're eligible for, like OHP.
Oh, sure, and that's actually a conversation we have quite often with students when they come primarily in the sort of the summer months. And we do sort of steer them to those resources. Some students are eligible, and that's wonderful. Some from out of state, California residents, for instance, are not eligible for OHP, things like that. But that is something that we work with. Now, I will say our international students are required to have insurance, but that is not a part of what we do at Student Health, so that's really sort of a business affairs, sort of component. And we do, of course, link those people to that resource as well. Absolutely.
So how much is the mandatory fee?
It's $150 each term here in Klamath Falls. And at the Portland Metro campus, it's currently $30 a term.
Is that pencil out? I mean, that seems really reasonable.
Well, thank you for that. We think it is too. We haven't raised the fees for 6 years, and we've functioned very well. In the future, we might have to look at that because as time marches on, the salaries sort of march on and increase. But we are able to make do with what we have. I've tried to not increase the fees, so over time we may have to look at that. But it's been.
Are there services that you would like to provide that you are unable to provide that increased financial development would help with, or do you feel like you're kind of covering the gamut for what would be on campus?
That's a good question. Honestly, if I were to be honest, what we would enjoy is and really appreciate is additional staff for the counseling side. The need is so great. But there's a space issue, bless you, where we're located. So our building is at the top of campus, this way. And then we'll do that right. They were all looking at me like, come on, you got it. Okay. We're a single building, right? And so on 3 sides of us, we can't expand. We could expand forward to the parking lot. And there were conversations about that previously because there were 113 times last year we did not have enough space for counseling. And so what that meant is I have to shuffle my staff who are not counselors to make room for the counseling. So honestly, if I had a wish list, that would be number 1, would be more space, and then probably 1 more counselor. But in terms of the medical side, the medical clinic functions really well. We do get requests for things like chiropractic, which is a pretty high liability. So we've had conversations about that in the past, about contracting with a provider, and physical therapists. And so in the future, if the curriculum works out where there's sort of sports medicine and the physical therapy piece, we might be able to incorporate pieces of those.
I was really intrigued by your efforts in the health promotion front. And I wondered, it seems as though sort of globally, we're looking at how we can really do a better job in the area of prevention, encouraging the Choose Well type program. And I just wondered if you felt like there was an opportunity to do more in that area, and because from an outsider's perspective, I feel like what a perfect group of individuals to work with. Highly motivated already, educated, but still young enough to have some of their, or they seem to have some of their habits shaped. Whereas, by the time you get to be me and Jeremy's age, you already have all your bad habits.
Not receptive.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right, and we know that prevention works. And in a prior life, I did health promotion for about 8 years as well with college students, and we know that if you can implement a behavior change, then that is far greater than just making them more aware. So we used to think, well, let's increase awareness and people will just make good decisions. Well, that's not necessarily like that doesn't always follow. So I am a huge proponent of prevention. I would love to see there be more prevention for faculty and staff as well. That doesn't fall under our purview currently because we are funded by student fees. We do the Healthy Active Challenge and open that up to faculty and staff, but I think there's always room for more health promotion.
I have questions about students in other locations beyond Portland Metro and Klamath Falls. How do you serve them? And
Yeah, thanks for that, there, Dan. Actually, yes, actually, students in the other locations don't currently pay student health fees. And so that makes them sort of not eligible for the services. There have been discussions about sort of this telecounseling. So if you think about like a HIPAA compliant way that you would sort of Skype for Business, actually the modality you could purchase and do this. So there are conversations about that, and I know Portland Metro has been having conversations about ways that they can reach out to the other students to help in that way. Also students on externship, for instance, right? You know, we work with them to try to get them referrals in wherever their locale is, but we're physically not there to try to help support them. There's some liability with the telecounseling as well. So it's sort of we're teasing it out as an option.
Another question I had is about summer. So it sounds like a lot of your people is your staff lower during the summer? And I know there are a lot fewer students during the summer, but how do you manage summer?
Yeah, we make it work, let me tell you. So what we do is on the medical side of things here in Klamath Falls, our medical advanced practice nurse comes in once a week during the summer term. So she's available for appointments and things like that. And the registered nurse also comes in once a week during the summer term. Mental health staff, here in Klamath Falls, we have tried to have a counselor on staff in the summer to make that available, but the usage is very, very low. I'm here in the summer because I'm 12 months, and so I see students and I'm available for crises work, of course, the whole summer. For the Metro, the counselor there actually does also go in once a week during the summer term as well. And she has seen more usage than we did here in Klamath Falls in terms of the mental health support over the summer. That's how we do. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was really impressed with the presentation and the breadth of services you provide. And I think one of the concerns, and you alluded to the fact that one of the concerns you have, which is a national trend, is just the growing number of people and how do you manage all of those students who come through your doors. But we have kind of a unique situation because there are not people external to the community who can manage that. So, because typically a lot of places, as you would have mentioned early on, we're going to see you only for 6 sessions, and then after that, we'll see somebody else.
That's
so
right.
How you manage that within the finances of what you have to play with is pretty remarkable to be able to see that. I have a couple of points, though, that I'd be intrigued by the trend in terms of students arriving on campus who have a need for a special accommodation because of a learning disability or otherwise, because I sense that nationally that's increasing. And so is that the trend here? And if so, what do you do with the faculty members who might be impacted by those students in terms of what they must do or what they can do or what they elect to do?
Yeah, sure. No, that's a great question. And so with the increase in mental health, obviously, then those students qualify for accommodations under the law for the diagnosable issues. Well, on our end of it, what we do is we write our documentation for the Disability Services Department and say, this is what we're seeing, this is the history. My job is not to make recommendations as to what would be helpful because I don't know that necessarily. And so we provide the documentation to Disability Services and they meet with the student and they determine what accommodations are appropriate and fair and all of those things. Do you want to speak, Aaron, to the Disability Services piece and how she works? He works with faculty members to explain that.
So there's a great relationship with Disability Services and faculty members today. It's improved, I think, I can attest to that over the last couple of years. So if there's an accommodation that's recommended by Disability Services to a faculty member for a particular class, and the faculty member says, that doesn't feel right to me, can we talk about it? Then they sit down with DS, either Andrew, Drew, or Aaron, and talk about what they're trying to achieve with the accommodation and how they might be able to adjust the course so that it's considered a same learning environment, but in a way that's appropriate for both the instructor and the student. Our numbers of students utilizing DS services continue to increase every year. Some start out receiving accommodations and then some decide not to have accommodations. And then many then come back after not having accommodations, wanting them again. So no surprise there, right? But our numbers, I think we have about 200 that have sought services, but about 140 or so that are active in receiving accommodations.
Sit down, because I wanted to ask a question of the two of you with respect to can you walk me through a process where you have a concern about a particular student who might be harmful to others? And how does that whole process work, and which officers are involved in terms of making people aware of or being informed by, and then how you manage that process?
So it kind of depends on how the student presents. If it's in a paper that they're after so-and-so and they're named, then typically the faculty member doesn't hesitate in calling me and saying, "This is scary, what do I do?" Sometimes they may go directly to campus safety, and Ed Daniels is our director of campus safety, to say, I'm concerned about this student, what do I do? So we have a team, we call it the Student Support Team, SST, and we meet every Thursday morning for an hour and a half to discuss any of these students that we become aware of via whatever means, whether a faculty member calls one of us directly or the student presents in our office or student health or wherever. And we talk about the issues, and we haven't gone as far as, let me rephrase that. So we look at what the student's doing, saying, and past behaviors as a best way of trying to figure out what their future behavior will be. Many times, it's not to a level of significance that we have to take immediate action, thankfully. We let them try to self-correct and get back doing things that they need to do as a successful student. On the few, and they're relatively few, that where you feel like, wow, we need to intervene, then we decide kind of what's appropriate. Is it me? Is it student health because they already have a relationship? Is it camp safety because it's more of a true threat, in which case often the city will then assist. We've had not many of those, one or two in the last few years, thankfully. So I think we have a pretty effective way of addressing the students of concern, kind of how we label them.
Can I run down
Yeah,
early
if you
this
want to.
week?
Yeah.
We had a student earlier in the week post some very threatening comments on Instagram about acting out violence in another city, not here. And so that local police contacted campus safety. Ed's officer went and talked with the student, who got him connected with his parents and started the chain. He also connected the student with Residence Life housing staff to make sure they were aware of the situation. And then yesterday they walked him up to our space, where he met with one of the counselors who was able to do sort of a violence assessment, determine to what extent really was this a risk. Got the student to commit to start taking his medication again, always a good thing. And he's currently scheduled with our psychiatric advanced practice nurse on Friday. So again, we're sort of able to work together and then quickly intervene. And we determined that it actually, the threat level was very low, even though it was a pretty big threat. And so that's a rarity though. I think, like Aaron's saying, it's not as common, but we do have mechanisms in place to sort of keep students from falling through the cracks.
Because it only takes one to make papers, and so that's so always make sure that we have a process. And you run drills on a regular basis, or what you might call somebody to group of people together on a Sunday morning because on Saturday night something happened.
I don't know that we ever drilled it,
Well,
but
we did active shooter, right, with the community in the spring.
yeah, but we're close enough that texting or calling right away.
And its officers do training on active shooters, so to faculty, staff, and student groups. In fact, we have them come to the Student Health Center every year because our space is unique. It's not a classroom, it's a little different, and how to respond in that situation. And then in the spring, we did a big active shooter drill with the community where we had police, law enforcement, sheriff, and the hospital. Sky Lakes is involved, kind of a mock active shooting situation where we sort of played that out as well.
In the instance, for example, as you had mentioned, when you have a student who writes something in an essay which causes some concern, do you then also poll the other faculty members with whom the student is taking classes, just to try to get a more complete picture of the profile of the student?
Yeah, I will send out an email to the faculty for that term and ask for any behaviors, anything that's of concern, attendance, success level, whatever they're willing to share.
I just add that, because in reference to me, I will say this, in terms of, especially in terms of disability services over the last couple of years, they're doing an excellent job communicating with faculty. Where at one time in fact, they're always trying to figure out what's the right approach to take here. There wasn't a high level of trust working, and I think over the last couple of years that's changed, and they're great. I really appreciate it.
Any other questions? Thank you so much.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Do we have any other business or any new business? Bring to our attention. Okay, good. So 9 minutes early, do I have do we have move to adjourn? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate all your time, and thank you so much for everybody for being in attendance today. We're good. We have lunch.
Oh, yeah. We have meat, yeah, saying nothing else.
Lunch is it you or is it right now?
Thank you. Hi, Maria.
I can go last.
Oh.
Yes.
So, I mean, I wouldn't mind this one class, but I would be back. I would be back to you. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm gonna surround this with
Oh, no, but I mean, every single.
Yeah.
So every Friday.
Oh, like you were on that as well.
Yes.
I gotta run over and do provost lunch. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, listen, it was good time. I love the feedback. I think we're gonna have a really great time.
I hope so, yeah, and it's good to ask for help, so that's.
Yes.
Because you will get it whether you ask for it or not.
Well, we'll lay the groundwork. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Oh, I should say that.
Good job.
So good.
People really like him. He had his own practice for a long time.
no.
Yeah.
My wife is.
But he just gets like